Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast, where we explore essential principles that empower athletes to learn life's most valuable lessons through sports.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast. Dustin and I are together again today and excited to talk about something, Dustin, that we've talked a lot about, but it's really cool when we hear Hall of Fame people that we admired growing up, teaching those same principles, maybe with different language, but this one comes from all-star point guard Steve Nash, right?
Yep.
And he was speaking at what looks like a basketball camp, and he talked about process over outcome, something you and I have talked a lot about. But first, let's listen to what Steve Nash said. I'd love for our listeners just to hear this.
Don't get fooled. Winning is not easy, okay? Expect the unexpected. Expect something you don't expect right around the corner. So the number one message I want to give you guys to get used to winning, to get comfortable with winning, is process over outcome. You guys heard that? If you haven't heard that, never forget this. Process over outcome. What does that mean? Do not worry about the outcome. The outcome is winning, okay? Do not worry about winning. Winning takes care of itself. The process is what wins. The process is what wins. So, you're feeling a little bit of pressure, you're feeling a little bit of how do we stay winning? Throw all that away. What do I have to do right now, today? How am I going to give it the best day I can give it? Okay? That includes starting last night. What's tomorrow going to take?
All right. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Cool stuff from Steve Nash. And I think we've maybe said those exact words before, right? But let me just start with this question in general, Dustin. Why is it so important, as you've coached, why is it so important to take a team and to not be so outcome oriented, but to be more process oriented? Why is that so much more beneficial?
Well, I think from a coach's perspective, for me, it's that sometimes the teams I've had that have had the most talent didn't end up with the greatest outcome, where other teams that didn't, did. And the reason I say that is that the outcome can oftentimes be, it's so fluid. You play one bad game and are you a bad team now? You have one bad game as a player and it happened to be a playoff game. Are you a bad player now, or did you just have a bad game? You became a really good player during the process. You became a really good teammate during the process. You learned all these things that you could, there are coaches that would take you and want you to play for them all over because of this person you've become. But you didn't have a great game in this one game. Does that mean that you're no good? Does that mean that your team's no good? For me as a coach, Chad, and some of our listeners might know that I coached a team that lost a real difficult game this year, a state championship game in a really tough fashion, where we had a big lead and lost it late and ended up losing in a game that getting to a state championship is really, really hard. Winning is, Steve Nash said it, it's so hard. And if you're in a program or on a team where winning is easy, then you're not learning much from the process. It's supposed to be hard. It should be hard. If we want to, because in life, those wins are going to be hard. When you have a win with your kids, or you have a win in your business, your work, your relationships, it's hard. We lost that state championship game. I don't for a second think that we are not the best team in the state. I believe our team was the very best football team. We just had a 3-minute span where a bunch of really crazy things happened. To this day, I'll go to my deathbed saying that was the best football team. And we did things during the year and we accomplished things, and the way those boys are, and being with them all at graduation and taking a picture with all those guys and knowing what they're doing now and what the relationships that are there and the things we learned and the people who we proved wrong. The year before, they only won 3 games. Yeah. They won 11 this last year and just played awesome. It's because the process of that year they won 3, they were learning things that helped them the next year win 11 and will help them in 2 years from now when they're doing all sorts of other things. But as a society, we seem to put way, way, way more attention on just win. And I get it. It is what it is. That's what you're ultimately, in a lot of circles, judged on, is did you just win? Really, at the core of it, I think the process is what's most fun too. I mean, that's where the learning happens. That's where the trips and the falls and the pain and the fun. It's all, the game's 5% of what you do. The 95% is the process of getting to the game, and that's where the real growth happens. But we have to make sure the kids understand that, look, if you're getting better and you're getting stronger and you're having fun, then you go out and play, and you know what? Sometimes you play great and you win, and you probably wouldn't beat that team if you played them 10 more times, but you got them tonight. But can you look in the mirror and say, I've become something? Or did you just get lucky and win?
Yeah.
I want my boys that I coach to be able to look in the mirror and say, I've become something. Yeah, we won, or no, we didn't, but I know that I'm a good player and I'm a good person and I'm ready for the next stage of life. Because I know a lot of kids, a lot of coaches who have been on teams that they just had a lot of good athletes and they won, but those kids didn't learn how to win. They just won because they were so much bigger and faster and stronger. And in 5 years from now, when that doesn't matter, or they're not the biggest, fastest, strongest anymore, they don't know what to do now because there was no process. It just happened because they were so much physically dominant than everybody. And it comes back around and kicks them in the butt 5 years later.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the things, I have a few thoughts on this, but one thought that just sprang to mind when you said that about this current transfer portal era that we live in. It seems to be like it's more change-oriented than process-oriented. You know, there's a saying that I heard someone say, if a fridge doesn't work, you know, in your kitchen, it's not going to work in your basement. You know, just changing location is not going to work. Yeah. And I think sometimes people are, okay, well, this just wasn't a good location for me, so I'm going somewhere else. And they aren't. We're just living in a society, in a sports society right now that's not trusting the process as much.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for that. I've been thinking a lot about this. I shared with you something that I had wrote about a few quotes from James Clear. James Clear wrote Atomic Habits, and I love that book. It resonates with me. You know, he just it's a great book for anyone who wants a good book to read over the summer. Athletes, if you want a good book that will help you develop good habits and go into that subject, Atomic Habits is amazing. But James Clear says a few things, and as I read these things, I think what hit me about process over outcomes is that process takes patience. I mean, right now I'm trying the best I can to get in better shape in my life. I'm entering a different era of my life, and if I don't take control of my health, I don't know if you can relate, Dustin, I think we were born same year, but if I don't take control of my health now, then it's going to be a lot harder to do it 10 years from now. You know, if I wait until it's a crisis, it's going to be hard. And so I've been really trying hard. And for anyone who's tried that journey before of becoming more healthy, you start eating more healthy, you start exercising way more consistently and stuff, you would like a month later just to be like, man, I feel so flexible and strong and lean, and that's just not the way it works, right? Yeah. But we've heard this phrase in sports a lot about stacking days. We would say stacking hours, right? And win the hour. But if you just become a healthy eater, for example, become someone who works out, become someone who stretches and does those things that maybe are annoying, but you do them anyway. If you become that type of a person, eventually the outcomes are going to come because you're that type of a person. In fact, James Clear, he said it, here's a few quotes from him. He said, the ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. It's one thing to say, I'm the type of person who wants this. It's something very different to say, I'm the type of person who is this. And then he says this, I think it's cool. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. True behavior change is identity change. I just love that. I think it's very, that says process to me.
Yeah.
Right? Any thoughts you have as you hear those quotes from James Clear, and just the patience of the process?
The patience is the key, because anything worth anything is going to probably take some time and some change, some hard change. And what seems like a good idea on paper or in our mind when we're, sitting on the couch. It's a little bit different when it's actually time to do the work and time to sometimes you have to change habits. You have to change the way the habit cycle, the habit loop refers to there's a trigger that triggers the habit. Then, there's the actual action, the habit itself, and then there's the reward that you get from that. Sometimes we have to change the trigger. We don't drive by the cookie store if you're trying to eat healthier and there's a particular store that every time you drive by you're tempted to go in there. Well, you need to drive a different way home then. Part of changing your habit means you have to change the way you live and do things, and that's hard. And the patience to do that is where I think most of us, we run out of that, and we don't stick through it. And so if we can teach kids that, I may have shared this on a podcast before here, but I talked to the boys I coach about this quite a bit, that there's an old Indian chief named Sitting Bull who said that in every man are two wolves, and we're feeding both of them. And the one that becomes the alpha dog, the alpha wolf, is the one that we feed the most. And there's a part of us that wants to sit on the couch and eat sloppy and watch movies, and there's another part of us that wants to get up and go do stuff and be great and be accomplished, right? And whichever one we feed the most, you talked about just the little habits that we make, the little things, and we become that.
Yeah.
The alpha dog, or who we become, is who we give the most attention to, or what we give the most attention to. And so I think a smart thing to do would be to really decide, is this really something that I want? Peel back the onion, and at the core, am I really serious about this?
The outcome, you mean? Where this is going to lead. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I got to be willing to understand that this, and this cannot get in the way. Know what your triggers are. We know what they are. Whatever the thing is we're trying to do, we know not all of it. There's going to be surprises along the way in the process. But certain teams, a team knows that they're going to have, they might not know who's going to get hurt, but there's probably going to be an injury during the season.
Yeah.
Right? And there's probably going to be a game where there's bad weather. There's probably going to be a game where you're just not clicking on all cylinders. So what are we going to do in those games? And have a plan for when those come. It's not the plan being, I'm done, never mind. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Steve Nash was talking about, that it's hard, and you have to recognize that when the hard comes, that it's okay. You knew this was coming.
Yeah. And
you'll get through it and stay on the bike and keep pedaling. Because really where all the growth happens in the process, whether we win or not at the end, you can win at the end and not have learned anything in the process. You just, the other team didn't play well and you won.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, did you get better, or did they just maybe get worse, or something happened? The process is where we all grow and achieve. And what you said about patience, I think, is critical to surviving the process.
Yeah.
Putting first things first. I know we've all heard of C.S. Lewis, but he had this quote. I just saw this yesterday, Chad, before we'd even prepped for this episode. He said, "Put first things first, and we get second things thrown in. Put second things first, and we lose both first and second things."
Huh. That's cool.
So during the process, know what first things first are, and then second things will come.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of doing the process, but you also have one foot over here doing this other stuff, you're not going to get there.
Yep. I agree. In fact, this will sound like it's going to be longer than it is, but 3 past guests came to mind, right, when we were talking. But yeah. So we just had on Allie Gomm, Duke track runner, and she made a point that I thought, that's a really profound point, and we probably have thought that in our heads, but I don't know that we ever articulated it the exact way. For her, she said, the process is part of the competition. If I stick to my process, I'm in the midst of competing with my competitors. We just aren't on the same field yet. So right now, it's summer and we have these football teams and drill teams and soccer teams. I'm trying to think of all the fall sports, cross country. You're competing right now. The process is part of that competition, building strength and building unity and all of that. So the competition is happening right now. And she said, I have learned that even if I'm hydrating, I'm competing. Because if I hydrate myself sufficiently, then I can practice and I'm healthy. So hydrating myself. getting sleep is part of the competition.
Yeah.
Because I know if I sleep right and I develop good sleep habits, putting down my phone 2 hours before I go to bed, that's part of competing against North Carolina if I'm at Duke, because I wanna be the best I can be. So that was one thought about process, that process is part of the competition. The other was, do you remember Brennan Schooler?
Oh yeah.
He said, like, the two dogs is what brought this to mind.
Yeah.
He talked about how he competes with himself in the morning. Like, there's very few mornings that he wakes up at 5:30 in the morning or whatever and thinks, it's a brand new day, you know? But when he wants to stay home and not go work out, not go do film study, he actually said he talks to himself and he says things in his mind that he probably couldn't say on our podcast. Like, you get your blanket butt out of bed right now and you get yourself, like, you are such a wuss. Like, stop, don't let sleep win, you know? And so I think that competitive notion of the process, a lot of people are good at being competitors when game time comes.
Yeah.
But they aren't good process competitors, and they'll be better when game time comes if they're competitive in the process. And then the third one was Justin Sua, and he talked about how mentally healthy it is to realize that showing up is really important, even if you can only show up at 70%.
Yeah.
You know, and I've realized that as I've been trying, to take better care of myself. I've used those lessons, particularly Brennan Schooler, when I want to stay in bed, I wake up 5:20 every morning, to go exercise and work out. And like when I want to stay in bed, I start, you are so lazy, dude. Like, get up and get going. You're going to feel fine in 10 minutes. Like, just get out of bed. But there have been times where I show up and I'm super excited to work out. It just feels so good. And there's other times that's like, you know what? I'm going to go in and I'm just going to get a little lift in today to keep my momentum. I do not feel up to it today.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get there and it feels great. But other times I get there and it's 50% of what I did another day. But I got there. And so I think as we've talked to all these people who are great in their field, they emphasize so much more process. And they seem to be very intentional. They set a process. They have Eric Weddle. Think of what Eric Weddle taught us. Tyler Haas and what he taught us. Peyton Henry and what he taught us. Like, they have a process that they've put in place that they refine over time. And then they just stick to that process. And so I just think that that's something, even though we've talked about it a lot as we go into summer, if you want to hit fall different, then you have to set a process and patiently stick to it, and you can. You can come back to school completely different. Closing thoughts, Dustin?
You're exactly right, man. It's easier said than done, though, but I think all of us know that if something is really important to us, even we may have done it, not even like officially said, I'm going to do this and planned it out and written goals, but if we just look at accomplishments we've had in our life, things we've done that we're proud of, we can probably sit down and write a process that was happening. Yeah. What I mean is that we may not have known, it wasn't maybe a focused, I'm going to do this at this time every day. But if we look back at it, we'll probably realize we were following a process just kind of intuitively because we did want this so much that we didn't let second things get in the way of first things. We made first things first, right? And we'll look back and say that's why that outcome was what it was. I think the big key in all of this is, and you kind of touched on it when we started. Unfortunately, maybe it's unfortunate. There really is if the outcome is winning, and that's it. Yeah. There's no guarantee that if you do everything right in the process, that outcome is still going to be the case. Yeah. It's just that's in sports. That's the big sort of. That's the one you can't always control, and you can go out and play your very best and have a really good day, and for whatever reason something happens and you lose. Yep. But what we all know is that if we put all we have into the process, along the way are going to be lessons learned and growth and things that are going to happen that are probably going to help us in other areas that if we look back, you and I played college baseball together. We can look back at our experience both before we met, when we were in high school, when we were in college, and afterwards, and realize that some of those processes, including things that we and our teammates experienced with that particular team at that particular time, that even though we did not win a national championship, the process of trying to become the best we could and the best, men that we could and everything we were trying to do has led us into all these other things.
Yeah.
And all these other successes that were the byproducts of us trying to learn how to become a really good baseball player and a really good teammate has led into careers and families and all these other things that, that were byproducts of that at the time were not the reason we were doing what we were doing. We just wanted to win a baseball game.
Yeah.
Right.
And we love baseball.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun.
Yeah. But that's what's so awesome about when you really commit to any sort of process that's a positive one, is that there's going to be all these byproducts of it, these branches that are going to come off of it that you don't really realize until later that, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have had this had I not done that process. And this is has nothing to do with sports. It has nothing to do with eating healthy or whatever. Yeah. Right? It was I created a habit that now helps me in all these other things. And so it's easier said than done. Winning, saying that it doesn't matter. Steve Nash wanted to win, and it's not that you don't want to win. It's just that you don't necessarily put all of your opinions of yourself on whether or not you were first or second at the end of the year. There's so much more to it.
Yeah, and I would just say to close, Dustin, if you haven't thought in depth about a process, there are some processes that are put upon us by coaches, there are coaches who give out shooting charts for basketball over the summer or, lifts to do or whatever it might be. If you are listening to this, or you're a parent that's listening to this, or a coach that's listening to this, if coaches and parents will help young people put a process in place and they start to discipline themselves to that process and really stick to it and stack hours and stack days, you will be teaching them one of the greatest lessons in life. Those who put processes in place that lead to places they want to go are so much more likely to get there. And so I love this. We need a process in place. If you're a young person listening to this, sit down. Start with the destination. Where do I want to get? What are my goals? How am I going to get there? What am I going to do every day? And then win the hour. And just be patient. If you go to the gym every day and you're lifting every day and you're adding a little bit of weight every single week between now and August, you cannot not get stronger. You will get stronger. It's just you have to be patient, but it's going to happen 2 and 3 pounds at a time per week. But you add that up over 3 weeks or 3 months, and now all of a sudden you're walking into football season, for example, benching 30 more pounds. You're that much stronger. You're that, it happens, but it's nothing good is going to happen in a few days. And so just be patient, put a process in place, and then patiently be consistent and win the hour. And you can become way more than you think you can. So,
perfect.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, everyone. Eyes up, do the work.
Thank you for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. To learn more about Especially for Athletes organization, get a copy of our book, The Sportlight, or to bring our program to your team, school, business, or organization, visit us at especiallyforathletes.org.